Yo, 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 welcome to Crate 808, and today we continue our look at the greatest 3-album runs in hip-hop history, and this one here is special. Yes, we are blessed to have a living rap legend on board today. It's the guy who gets more biz than Marquis as he sparks the mic like lightning. It's frightening when he's hyping, because he's rowdy like Roddy Piper, he's hyper, the type of guy to let it fly like a sniper. So, hold on, so Braniac Dum Dums bust the scientifical, approach the course, and the force is centrifugal, because this man flows with the greatest ease, never did care about their haters. Please, yes, he's not Ralph Mouth, Richie, or the Fonz. He's no joke. He schools that ass like St. John's. We have got an absolute microphone fiend in the hot seat today. Please welcome Masta Ace on board the show for a second time. How are you doing, my man?
Man, that was quite an intro. Did you rehearse that? I have, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I've been rehearsing that. I've been making sure I don't slip. That's like that's bars from several different songs, and you did it seamlessly, like it was all part of one rhyme.
Bro,
I couldn't do that.
Oh, wow, mate. I'm not even a rapper, but I just wanted to say the gems you've dropped inspire us all in little ways over these decades, and it seems to come out that way. And today, bro, man, I'm so hyped for you to come on and do this, because your album run, 1993, Masta Ace Incorporated, SlaughtaHouse. We've talked about that album so many times on this podcast. I think that people are quite versed on that incredible album. Then Sittin On Chrome 95. And then Disposable Arts in 2001. We're going to go into them with you and pick your brain about these amazing records. But before we do, Masta Ace, I just got to ask you one thing that I ask everyone when they come on. Ace, what is the least hip-hop thing you've done in the last 24 hours, my man?
The last 24 hours? The least hip-hop thing I've done in the last 24 hours. Let's see. I'm just trying to remember what I did yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I went to the gym today. That doesn't seem to be very hip hop because nobody does it. Hey, I ran on the treadmill and I did some abs, the ab machine, and I did some arms. But that I don't think that's considered 24 hours. Like if you had said a month, maybe I could have thought about it more. But the last 24 hours, the least hip hop thing. Last night for dinner, I made for my family ramen noodle soup.
Oh, nice.
Like from scratch, meaning like not like the I'm talking about like chopping up all the vegetables, sauteing the vegetables and sesame oil, cooking the broth separately, adding the broth to the vegetables, combining those, adding the noodles last. So I became a ramen chef last night.
Bro, and a rhyming chef as well. Sorry, I had to put that there. A ramen rhyming chef. It's all there. I'm sorry for everyone. I dropped that one. But I was going to say, Masta Ace noodles, ramen noodles, Masta Ace ramen. I'm absolutely here for it. If it ever kicks off, yeah, I'm absolutely here for that. Well, I enjoy that. I really enjoy that. What I enjoy more though is talking more about these albums. I needed to, because I know you've talked about these and there's amazing docs out there. Do go out, check out the docs on Disposable Arts and stuff like that. But for me, I just want to kick this off with, as the artist who made this run, out of all of these 3 albums, these 3 kind of eras of your career, is there one that means more to you than the others, and why?
Definitely. It's the Disposable Arts album.
Mm-hmm.
That particular time period was a very dark time for me career-wise. I really felt that I had kind of reached the end of my career. I felt like there weren't fans out there that were really interested in what I was going to be doing going forward after Sittin On Chrome. The album that I had just been working on for 3 years prior to 2001 got shelved, never came out. So it was just a really dark time. I reached the point where I was actually I had resumes that I made up a resume. I was going around in record labels trying to get a job at a record label. Like I was at that point. Like I'm done. I'm not rapping anymore. And so for that album for me to be inspired enough to make that album, and I will say the UK had a lot to do. Well, I don't know if you knew this or not, but the UK had a lot to do with that album being made because it was the UK where I traveled in 2000. Right at the end of 2000, I did a tour in the UK. Did about, I don't know, 10 or so dates in the UK. Mm-hmm. I think it was like 2 in Germany. And that tour inspired me to go back in the studio and do one more record, which became Disposable Arts. And that one album has extended my career for 20 plus years. If I don't drop Disposable Arts, we're probably not even having this conversation today, and none of the other records that followed would have ever have happened.
Wow, that is incredible. That's pretty seismic, man. For you, then, when you listen to, do you listen to SlaughtaHouse or Sittin On Chrome, or do you ever listen back to these
individual songs, but not in their entirety? I haven't listened to. I generally don't listen to my albums in their entirety after I make them. Like maybe like the first week or so when I'm kind of like listening to make sure everything sounds right. But once it's like out commercially and it's in the stores and for fans to consume it, I really never go back. I can't think of a time that I've actually gone back and I might have gone back and listened to a couple of songs, but not like full album, top to bottom, skits, everything in place. I don't do it because I've done it so much leading up to it.
Right, it's because you
gotta remember I've done it. I've listened to it, 100 times before you guys ever hear it.
I see.
Yeah.
I was wondering if artistically, like you're not, I don't know, if you're listening back to something, or you don't want to get stuck in a loop of what you've already done before and be influenced going forwards, and maybe you just want a fresh start. But before really going into each album, one thing that I've always loved about you, bro, is that it's not even a reinvention. It's just this kind of, you're one of, and I always cite it as you are one of the best like aged rappers. And I know you love your biking, I know you're staying healthy, I know all that, but it's not just that, but just lyrically listening back to these 3 albums and what you dropped since all these years, I do think you're one of the better rhymers and artists who's aged the best. Like Long Hot Summer, Brooklyn Masala, that is like stuff I still play today. For you,
thank you.
All good, man. It's thank you for the music. What do you put like that down to? Like the fact that you can still make music today, and did these 3 albums like play into that? Your work on these albums, did they help that keep going today?
Absolutely. But the reason why these records sound the way they sound and why I rap the way I rapped on those records is because, believe it or not, I felt like I still had something to prove, and I still feel that way. I still feel like people don't really pay attention like that. They don't, like, I'm not somebody that I'm never on anybody's list. I've seen a million of these different lists, top 50, top 100 even rappers, like, and to not be mentioned in, in these publications when they list the top 50 or top even 100 rappers, and I'm looking at the list, I'm like, I'm better than 50 of these people. Like, they're bugging out right now. Like, as far as skillfully, maybe I don't have the hit records with the catchy choruses and the dance joints, those jingles, but I don't have those ringtone joints that everybody knows and sings to. But just in terms of actual ability and skill, so I use that as fuel. Like, and so every time I go in the studio to make a record and I'm writing these verses, I'm writing them from a place of, people don't think I'm good. They think I'm terrible. I'm gonna show them on this one. I'm gonna make sure they know on this one I'm not playing around. And so that's what I try to do. I just try to make records and prove myself, continue to prove myself. That's the goal.
I see. Yeah, it completely makes sense, especially listening to these. And I know you're not in the best state to like make some of these albums, and you're going through a lot of stuff with industry and stuff like that. But lyrically, it's never not sharp. It's always on point, where I'm like, even Sittin On Chrome, and we'll go into the album later, but even that, there's moments where I'm like, oh my God, the rhyme in there, whatever. But, it's always on point. And but you said there about like you're not on these lists, and the way I look at it is obviously these gatekeepers have kind of fallen. Yeah, there are still like now influencers stepped up, influencers here and there. So anybody could put a list together. But for you, I saw you do the Tiny Desk a few years ago, NPR's Tiny Desk. I mean, that must have felt good, like a younger audience maybe getting tapped into some of your stuff. How did that come about, man?
Well, the person who curates that show, she used to work at J Core Records back in 2001. So she was actually one of the people involved in Disposable Arts as far as behind the scenes, working to get that album out and promote it. I think she was doing promotions at the time or some kind of A&R, but she, that J Core folded, that distribution situation folded up or whatever, and so she had to go get another job. But we always just stayed in touch, and so when the opportunity presented itself, she's like, "Would you want to come up here and do a set?" I'm like, "Absolutely." I love the concept. I've done shows with bands before, and and so it was a no-brainer for me. I'm glad she asked me to do it. Shout out to Abby O'Neill. That's her name.
Big up Abby, absolutely. No, it's brilliant. Lovely set as well. What a wicked set. But going back to like the 90s, and we're talking like your stage of your career here where you're going into SlaughtaHouse, you have rapped. What was it you said? Almost had the 90s by the throat. I was just that close to getting money by the boat. And that hit me when you said that. So, you've rapped about not chasing trends and stuff like that. What have been your biggest obstacles, would you say, when trying to maintain that mindset when making a piece of art or making music kind of thing?
The biggest obstacle is the industry. Because the industry tells you that if you're going to be considered a viable artist that is commercially acceptable, commercially successful, there's certain things that you just need to do creatively. This is not about how good you can rap. It's about how you look, how you dress, your presentation, the chorus, who's on the song with you. It's all of these different factors. And so as an artist, especially in that time in the 90s, I'm trying to exist. I'm trying to stay relevant in this space that I'm in, but I'm getting all of these signals, all of these dog whistles that tell me, oh, well, if you don't do this, then you're not going to be allowed into the kingdom. And so it's tough because it puts you creatively, it puts you in a place where you're kind of torn. You don't know, you want to be successful. You want to be, you're looking at your peers, people that were on the same exact level as you when you started out. And now you're seeing them ascending and getting radio play and doing huge concerts and huge tours. And you're like, well, me and him are like the same. Like, I'm just as good as him. Like, and so it causes you to question if you're doing the right thing. So for a lot of artists, it can, that those industry norms and rules become an obstacle. Some just fall into line. And I don't discredit anybody who decides that that's what they want to do, but it just didn't feel right for me. It didn't feel right for me to go that route. I had to sort of blaze my own path. And so I decided to do things my way, make the record that felt good and honest to me as a creative person, and just let the chips fall where they may. And that album, Disposable in particular, it put me in a different place. It woke up another part of my career that I didn't really know existed. And all of a sudden I had all of these new young fans who really didn't know me before Disposable Arts. They weren't familiar with the previous albums. They went back afterward and got those albums and know those songs as well. But yeah, it was almost like a reset. It was almost like you're playing this game, you're 7 years in the game, 8 years in the game, and then you just press reset and you start from square one again. And that's what Disposable Arts was. That was the reset for me.
Damn. So if we're kicking back to the first album in this run, And we talked about SlaughtaHouse, and people go check out the Patreon we got going on because we did a review on there. We have cited, you've been on before, I've talked to you about it before. But I do think, and I hope that we can help do this, is these fascinating documents of musical history. This is like hip hop history. You shouldn't really ignore this. And you put so much, I would say, thought and emotion into that record. Again, there's concepts laden throughout this whole run that are just incredible. The concept MCs, goddamn, you got to be right up there on that list. And I think I just wanted to ask you, really, between Take a Look Around in 90, end of the 80s kind of thing, and then coming up to SlaughtaHouse in 93, what happened in between that for you, artistically, spiritually? Where were you at that time?
That's a good question. There was a lot going on. I dealt with almost the same thing that I dealt with right before Disposable. My album got shelved. I had an album I was working on. It was going to be my second album for Cold Chillin'. And I was in the studio working on that album. I had about 12 songs done. And I really wanted to leave the label. I didn't want to really be there anymore, but I didn't see an opportunity to go anywhere else. But what really pushed the whole thing forward was Warner Brothers, which was the distributor for Cold Chillin'. They decided that they only wanted Cold Chillin' to keep, I think it was like 8 artists. Big Daddy Kane, Biz, Shantae, Shan, IU, G-Rap, that's 6. There might have been like one more, maybe like 7 artists. And everybody else, they weren't interested in going forward with. And I was one of the people that Warner Brothers wasn't interested in going forward with. And so that kind of put me in a certain mindset. The feeling of not being wanted, rejection. And the thing that really fueled me was, my first single off Take a Look Around was Me and the Biz, which was a song that I kind of did just as a lighthearted record for the album, because there was a lot of really serious, topics on that album. And it was Warner Brothers' decision to make that the single. I tried to fight. I was a brand new artist. I didn't really have a lot of legs to stand on, but I said, I don't want this to be the single. This is just like a little spoof record. Like, why would? But for them, they wanted to try to capitalize on the fact that Biz's name was associated with the song. So they're just trying to capitalize on whatever name Biz had. It had nothing to do with me. And so, I was kind of forced to make that my first single, which never sat right with me. And then for them to then turn around and say that I'm one of the people that they didn't want anymore, I'm like, how dare y'all? Like, y'all the ones who like, I could have put out other records and maybe we could have had more success if I had done the records that I wanted to put out. So I listened to y'all, and now y'all reject me. So all of that was fueling me. So when I got signed to Delicious Vinyl, and it was time to do this new record, my mindset was, I'm gonna make the hardest record I could possibly make, the hardest, darkest, because Me and the Biz, there was so much backlash that I got, like, from the neighborhood and from kind of like industry friends, like, oh, you got a puppet, like they were looking at me like I wasn't a serious artist. They were looking at me, like I was a novelty act, not a real artist. And that stuff bothered me because I knew what I was, and I knew that would have never been a single if it were up to me.
Yeah.
And so being viewed as a novelty act and people cracking jokes, behind my back, all of that stuff fueled me. And I said, when I go in the studio by myself to do the record that I want to do, it's going to be super hard beats, super dusty, dark. It's going to be nothing like what Warner Brothers would have wanted. And so that's why SlaughtaHouse sounds the way it sounds, because I was really rebelling against what I had dealt with at that major.
Interesting, because that's fascinating. You getting grief and like shit for the puppet and me and Biz, and I remember growing up a bit later than that in hip hop, and Ego Trip having like that puppet around all the time and having it in the ego.
It became cool. But to be honest with you, the reason that Ego Trip even had that puppet is because they found the puppet at my management's office. It was because I wanted nothing to do with that puppet. Wow. I didn't even want to be around it. Like, so it was actually in a garbage pile about to get thrown out. And one of the guys from Ego Trip came, I think it was Sasha, came up and saw the puppet going out for garbage. He's like, "Yo, what are y'all doing?" Like, "Oh, we're throwing this out. Ace doesn't want it. We're throwing it out." He's like, "Oh, I'll take it. If y'all throwing it out, I'll take it." And that's how he ended up with the puppet, because I completely rejected that whole idea, the concept, the puppet, all of it. I didn't want anything to do with any of it.
Damn, I see. Right, I did not know that. That's amazing. So when you're going now into SlaughtaHouse, like you said, you want to go hard as possible. It's a collaborative thing as well, right? So it's Masta Ace Incorporated, and what I find fascinating is you've done that first album in 1990, Take a Look Around, and then you're going into this, and for me it feels like after hearing all these years is you became more of the director of that project. Like, you're not in the forefront as much as well, you're also going and directing the whole project. And what I find amazing is it's worked so well for streaming days now, because there's no albums anymore. They're just songs to put on a playlist almost. But this is an album, and you could pick out Jack B. Nimble, and you could pick out, Sedan and all these other tracks to just put in your playlist. I don't know if you guys had that in mind when you were like, forming this, that they should stand on their own as well as work within this concept of, being the hardest,
Well, the idea was, you go in, you make songs that can stand on their own, and then try to tie those standalone songs together into a cohesive album through the skits, and that's always been what I've tried to do. I don't make a song. I never made a song to try to tell the story on the album, or to try to tell the story that the skits are going to. The songs always come first. And then I try to creatively figure out how to tie the songs together with the story.
Wow!
So okay. That's why it sounds like that. But you're right. I was kind of the director of that album because you got to remember the first album. Marley was running the show. Marley, he made all of the decisions about which verses to use or keep, or which verse I should do re-record. Like, he was in charge. So, but I paid attention. I asked a lot of questions during those sessions when I was working with Marley. So I felt like I had learned enough to go out on my own and put together a record, even though I had no experience doing it. But I did have a lot of guys around me that were talented beat makers. And so we would literally all be in the studio, 4 or 5 guys in the studio, sampling stuff. How does it sound? Oh, that sounds kind of dope. Put this with this. I got these horns. One of the songs on that album, Mad Wunz, right? One of my favorite joints on that album. Actually, I still love performing that song to this day.
Oh, you still got it in the set? Amazing.
Yeah. And my memory always fails me when it comes to who produced what. I know I got co-production on majority of the songs on that album, because Mad Wunz in particular, I remember we had the main beat, the main groove, right? And so I wrote the rhyme to that main groove, but we needed something for the hook. And I remember going into my records that I had there in my bag. And one of my records, don't ask me what record it was, because I don't remember. I put the record on the turntable. I literally put the needle down, and that horn that you hear in the hook, that was the first thing that played. It played. I backed it up. I played it with the beat. I was like, this is it right here. Boom. It was that fast. I remember that moment, because I was like, man, that was easy, and this sounds so dope. That always stayed with me, because you would think that it would take a couple of hours to find this perfect thing. I literally, first record, dropped the needle. That's it right there. Pull that back. Boom. Let's sample that. Bang. Done.
Damn.
And so that stood out to me. But yeah, I didn't make the initial beat, but my contribution to that song was those horns in the chorus.
Oh man, that is so jazzy. That whole this album's got a lot of that though. It's got the jazziness. It's satirical. It has that kind of idea of what hardcore hip hop. I know we talked about this in our last chat about how hardcore. Explain it now. What for you? Hardcore hip hop. When did the definition of what hardcore? When did that change for you? Do you remember that changing in hip hop in the 90s? Like what hardcore was, kind of thing.
Well, what was happening at that time in hip hop is, and it had a little bit connected to, if you remember when Naughty by Nature came out, and Tretch is walking around with the baseball bat with the spikes, and he's got all these weapons, and he's dressed in a certain way. He's had his hair with the braids, and the real big baggy clothes and the vest, and no sleeves. That whole look, and that was the East Coast kind of look, and then the West Coast, it was NWA. Everybody trying to emulate NWA, and it was rapping about guns and smoking blunts and drinking 40s and shooting people and all of this kind of stuff. So what was happening at that time in around the early 90s, record labels were running out trying to sign the next NWA, the next, Naughty or a group like a Naughty. They were looking for anybody who had that look, had that sound, and had that lyrical content. And I'm sitting there like, that's not, everybody don't have to do that. That don't mean that doesn't make that harder than this because they rapping about shooting and drinking. For us, it was always about what the beat sounded like. Are the beats hard or not? Like, to me, Ultramagnetic was hardcore because the drums, the beats. It was about, what the song sounded like, not about the imaging and the lyrical content. But it became that, and so it was frustrating for me because I knew I wasn't going to rap about that. I was anti all of that. I was going to be anti, weapons and guns and 40s and blunts. I didn't drink 40s. I didn't smoke weed. None of that. So they were trying to I felt like they were trying to tell me that I wasn't viable to be in hip hop because I wasn't doing these things. So my reaction was to just go against it all. And so that's why that record came out the way it did. And that's why the theme of the record was me, basically railing against the idea that this is what hardcore is. And if you're not rapping about these topics, then you're not hardcore.
Interesting. Because even interwoven though, in all that ethos of like, what's hardcore, what's not, you've got like real lessons about like morality and, like actual, like, holy shit, this actually happens. And, so there's a lot of depth to it as well. When it first came out then, what was the reception like? Do you remember that instant reception to SlaughtaHouse when it came out? What were people saying?
It was, it was lukewarm. And the reason it was lukewarm is because the previous several months right before SlaughtaHouse dropped, Dr. Dre dropped The Chronic.
Right.
92. I was already done with my record. So it wasn't like I could hear The Chronic and go, wait, let's go back in the studio and do a couple more joints. The Chronic was sonically the most crystal clear, loud, hard EQ'd album that had ever come out, in my opinion. It was like the perfect. I was like, how does he make these? How does he make it sound like this? Like, what am I not doing right? Because at that time, I was really into, the EQ part of it, the bass, the bottom, making sure everything was super loud and super crisp. But when I heard that, I was like, oh, my stuff is nowhere near this loud and crisp. And The Chronic was all over the radio in New York City. Like, it was getting crazy airplay. He had all of these really, really clean, crystal clear, loud, hard sounding songs that worked great on Black radio in New York City and around the country. And my record didn't sound like that at all. The Chronic sort of set the tone for what going forward what would be the blueprint for what commercial hip hop needs to sound like in terms of sonically. And I completely missed the boat on the sonically part of it. I was into the bottom, the bass, and all of that, but I was more. I like dustier grooves. I like the little snap, crackle, and pop from the records and all that. So I was into that. Which is not that there was anything wrong with that, because there's a market for that, but it's a much smaller market than what Dr. Dre got with the Chronic. And so I just realized listening to it that I would like play them side by side. I was like, man, my album cannot compete at all with how this record sounds. And so I knew that this reception, every time I dropped, there was always something else that was like the counterbalance to what I was trying to do that would always go further and be more popular. So that particular year, it was the Chronic, and the Chronic just ran away with it. Ran away with all the awards and the whole 9 yards. Became, really a cultural timepiece from that time period. So that's what it was up against. And when you're going to go up against a record like that, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. So the reception was lukewarm because everybody was playing Chronic.
But then as the years have gone past, and there's been this reappreciation, I feel, just from hip hop heads that I know, of this album, and that it has aged really well. Do you remember a time when you started thinking, actually, this album's quite special? Like, there are quite a few people loving this. Do you remember that time about SlaughtaHouse?
I do. It was a small faction of people that excuse me, that loved that record. But I didn't know it until years later. The day that the first time I met Eminem was backstage at a show at the Nassau Coliseum in Long Island, New York. And we met backstage, just him and I. And he told me that when he was younger, he was broke. He was riding around in a beat up car with his friends, which was D12. Proof and the guys. He said SlaughtaHouse was all we played. Like we played that album nonstop. And over the years, I started to meet these people that are like in their 40s, mid to late 40s, and they all, when they meet me, they're like, "Yo, SlaughtaHouse, man. That's how I got hip to you with SlaughtaHouse." Because I was in high school and that album came out, and so it was one of those records that resonated with people that were about 17, 18 years old during that time. But the kids that were 17, 18, they weren't really necessarily playing, the commercial stuff. They were more trying to find the stuff that was, the underground kind of best kept secret kind of stuff that nobody knows about. Kids, they want their own thing. Like they don't want to listen to the hip hop that their elders are listening to. They want to listen to stuff that they like. So I was surprised to know that album resonated with the teenagers of that time. The guys that were teenagers in '93. It resonated with them, and they grew up, and now they're in their 40s or whatever, they're close to 50. And they're telling me like, yeah, that was their record. And it's cool because, you would, I didn't feel that at the time because most of those young people probably weren't, necessarily moving the needle as far as making the sales go up or anything like that. So, and they probably weren't calling the radio station. The radio station was really catering to females. The demographic for Black radio is females, I believe it's 18 to 25. That's the demographic.
Right.
I didn't have records that females cared about. I just didn't. It was all boys, guys. So when you don't have records that appeal to females, you're not going to get radio play. You're just not. And so that was the formula at that time. You needed to have records that appealed to the females, or you weren't gonna get a real fair shot.
Interesting.
And the Chronic had all records for girls.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So when we then talk about some of the particular cuts off this album, it is a big piece of work as well, so there's a lot to dive into. But just on a personal tip, we do have like categories like, you know, most rewindable moments on an album, or like what I like to call 5 mic moments, like a moment of perfection where you're like, that gets 5 mics every time. And Jack B. Nimble is one of them songs for me that it's just one of the hardest songs I've ever heard. Anyway, generally, it's got that lo-fi sound, your charisma's going through on the mic. It's incredible. And again, shows this album has real scope. Like, you are going into, like, it's not just about the hip hop industry. You're also talking about your community and social consciousness and, you know, Jack being nimble, and you're thrown right into the middle of this kind of almost like a car chase, almost like a chase. Do you know what I mean? When you're listening to it.
Yeah.
What's the story behind that song? How did that come along? How does it feel now, knowing that that's out there?
So I got to shout out my guy Unique, who produced that joint. Unique produced it. Little known fact about the sample of Jack B. Nimble. It's actually the same sample, Hard to Handle, that the symphony loop is from. People don't know that. It's a 1 bar loop of a tiny piece of that Hard to Handle song that the symphony is made off of.
Right.
He grabbed the 1 bar loop of that song. If you listen back to that sample, you can find it. It's very easy to find, but it's literally a 1 bar loop. It just repeats. Just Blaze, when he was coming up, that was one of the records that blew his mind. He was still trying to find his sound or whatever. But Just Blaze mentioned that he loved that album because of these 1 bar loop things that my guy Unique used to do. And I guess it helped him figure out his sound. But that particular song, it was about a pretty well-known story in New York anyway. There's a guy named Larry Davis, who, the story goes, the police, he was wanted by the New York City Police Department they made it sound like it was like a drug thing, but it actually was, he knew about corruption, a few corrupt police officers that were doing some dirt in the community. And so he had threatened to basically snitch on the cops that were doing this corruption, you know, and so they decided to exercise an arrest warrant to go put him under arrest. But they were gonna, he felt, and he's probably felt correctly, that if they arrested him, they were gonna kill him in custody or kill him on the scene. So when they showed up, he figured, I might as well shoot it out because they're gonna kill me anyway. So he had a huge shootout with the New York Police Department and actually got away and lived to fight another day. They eventually apprehended him, like, I don't know if it was a few days or weeks later, but he was on the run for a while. But he actually had a shootout with them and got away. And so that kind of put egg on the police department's face. The thing about it that, and I'm surprised, and maybe there is a documentary. If there is one, I'm not familiar with it, but there should be. I don't know if any of those officers that he was going to snitch on, I don't know if they ever got exposed. I don't know if that whole story ever got told. You know, they just, in the newspapers, they just made it seem like he was the bad guy who shot at a bunch of cops. And then, you know, he got arrested and put in jail. He eventually died in jail of very mysterious circumstances.
Damn.
So they killed him. That's the bottom line. They killed him. So the song was me trying to kind of reenact. Obviously, I wasn't there. I don't know what he went through. I just, in my own mind, kind of created a fictional version of what I think may have happened. And so it was about Larry Davis, you know, run on the run from police because he had information that was going to get some of these police officers in trouble. I actually need to I should do a Google search to find out if anybody ever did a documentary about him or that story. It could exist. I'm not sure, but very interesting story. And it was one kind of like a folklore kind of story in New York, in Brooklyn in particular, because he's from Brooklyn. The whole thing happened, I think, in Brooklyn. And so you know, in a weird way, like the community was rooting for him. Like they loved the fact that the cops didn't just kill him. Like he shot it out with them and got away and was on the run. And people were kind of like cheering for him because they know how dirty the cops were moving at that time. But so that's what that was the basis, you know, of the song. I didn't know all the details of it, but I wrote the song based on the few details that I did know about his story.
That's fascinating, man. That is fascinating. Eye-opening, absolutely. What about stuff like, so Style Wars, that's another one. That Style Wars is just, again, such an amazing hidden gem. People go check it out. But also the remix on the 12-inch. The 12-inch just looks serious. Like tell me about that. Obviously Star Wars as well, but also that album cover to the 12-inch, which is very different to the album cover of the album itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I took the title. I snatched the title directly from the graffiti documentary. Documentary that I really loved and enjoyed, had a huge impact on me. So I just wanted to use that title. And it was, you know, Star Wars was just me, just bars, just going in, just talking my junk. You know, I say a bunch of different things on this. There's no real rhyme or reason to what I'm rapping about, but it's just basically I'm better than you and you can't do what I do. And that's essentially, you know, the style that I use versus the style that you use. You know, I use this term, imaginary adversary. I need to make a song called Imaginary Adversary because as rappers, we will create an imaginary adversary, and that's who we write about. It's not. A lot of times people think you rapping about such and such. You talking about this person? No, it's just an imaginary adversary that I'm talking about, that I'm going against. And so, Style Wars was definitely one of those type of joints. It was just a braggadocio joint, super noisy. You know, I love the noisy loop because, and I love the remix as well. But I love that noisy loop. You know, at that time, noisy loops were pretty popular. You had Cypress Hill Cypress had probably some of the noisiest records.
Yeah.
Public Enemy was known for their really noisy records. So I just wanted to do a joint that was super noisy, like that was just, and you know, that guitar, that which was, if I'm not mistaken, BB King.
Oh, right. Boom.
I shouldn't be telling all my sample sources, but it was a BB King, and it was another one bar loop, one little piece. Yep.
I love that, man. I love that. And the album cover, that, like, obviously the album cover to SlaughtaHouse, I think we talked about that in the last interview we did, but also that different album cover, the alternate, the variant that you had, where you were, it's like in a meat factory almost, you know, when you're like with the cleavers.
Oh, well, that was the 12-inch cover though.
Yeah, the 12-inch, the 12-inch, yeah.
Yeah. So, the 12-inch cover was for SlaughtaHouse. And we shot, so that cover, the photos for that cover were shot at the SlaughtaHouse video shoot. If you've seen the SlaughtaHouse video shoot, you have. So that's unique. Unique. The guy who produced, he's one of the guys in the Jerry Curl wig.
Right.
He's one of the rap. I don't know if he's MC Negro or the Ignorant MC. He's one of those two guys.
Right.
But that's unique. That's the same producer that produced these last two records we talked about, Jack B. Nimble and Star Wars. And so he plays that role of that, you know, spoof character with the Raiders hat and the Jerry Curl wig. But the day that we shot that video for SlaughtaHouse, we took those photos. So that we used one of the photos from the video shoot because they had the butcher's cloaks on with the blood all over them and all of that.
Yeah.
That
was sick. Absolutely. That was so sick. Sorry. But talk about unique. We can't move into the other album yet until we talk about Saturday Night Live and the Saturday Night Live remix as well, which is incredible. But that, first off, I have heard a rumor that the scratches on that are primo, but uncredited kind of thing. Is that true?
Yeah. Premier does the scratches. He wasn't, he didn't do the beat. We shot him out. We shot him out at the beginning. You hear DJ Premier. So that was just us shouting him out. but he did the scratches.
Right.
Live from New York.
Right.
Saturday night. He did those. He's a friend, man. Like I've been friends with Premier for has to be 30 years now. And we were very close during that time period because the studio where I did the SlaughtaHouse album, the studio in Brooklyn called Firehouse Studios. It was Guru who brought me to that studio.
Right.
Cause it was my first time. I wasn't with Marley anymore. I had to figure out where I was going to work. And Guru was like, "Yo, I'll bring you to a studio where we work out of. You can work out over there." And Guru brought me there. I met the owner. His name is Yoram. And I started working out of that studio. I did that whole album. The whole album I did was at the Firehouse Studio. Damn. And so that's how Premier was in my general area because we were around each other. They were working on No More Mr. Nice Guy, I want to say, or had just finished No More Mr. Nice Guy. What year did that come out?
It was 92?
92.
So is that Step in the Arena,
92.
maybe? Might be Step in the Arena.
It could have been Step in the Arena. You're right. Yeah, because No More Mr. Nice Guy was 90. Yeah, they were working on the Step in the Arena joint. So they were, I was, we used to hang out heavy, man. And so that's why Premier did the scratches. Like, at that time, it wasn't even like a big deal. It wasn't like, yo, we got Premier. Like, it wasn't that because that was just my man who was a DJ who could scratch. That's what it was. Like, yo, do these scratches for me. Like, would you, and so it wasn't like now when you look back, it's like, wow, that's crazy. You have Premier doing scratches on the joint. And he didn't even do a beat. But at the time, it's just your friend. It's your boy helping you out. I'll do the scratches for you. I'll do the scratches for you. It was literally like that.
But that's why I love old school 90s, especially hip hop. It's so almost innocent. It is the Wild West. I know 80s has laid a massive foundation, but the way they hit the charts, and you just like, people are just in each other's videos. You've got Cube and Cypress Hill and Q-Tip in the same video. You've got, and that I always loved that kind of, real family. There was a kind of, I know there was beef and stuff like that, but there was an overarching feeling of like hip hop is a bit of a family. But before we go into Sittin On Chrome then, is there any other tracks? I've got, Crazy Drunken Style, the way that is so off kilter, such a weird produced track, Lay Model, Sedan, Walk Through the Valley, all these songs. Is there any that stick out to you or you want to talk about before we jump into Chrome?
I love Late Model Sedan. I like to talk about that because the style that I rapped in on Late Model Sedan, I was literally channeling Ice Cube.
Interesting.
That's you. I don't rap like that on any other song. But when I heard that beat, immediately I heard Ice Cube's voice on it. It sounded like something Ice Cube would have rapped on. So I decided to rap in a style similar to what I heard him do on, like, I'm trying to think of one of the more clearly noticeable joints, but it's a few records that he rapped in almost that exact cadence, and so I just literally channeled his flow to that beat because it fit, it made sense, and so I just wanted to say that about that song because it was kind of important, and what the song is about as well, the fact that guys that you actually knew were driving around robbing you and others, and you had to watch it. But the thing at the end of the song that repeats, "I ought to be safe in a black neighborhood," like that was super important to me because I grew up in the projects, and a lot of the guys that were doing the crime and robbing people were the people that I actually knew and played football with when I was younger, like in the neighborhood. Like now they're running around. So it's kind of crazy to think that, wow, this guy who I used to play sports with, now that we're 20, if I was to come around with some jewelry on, he would literally pull out a gun and try to rob me for my jewelry. Like, what something's not right. Something's weird and wrong about that. So that's what the song was really, talking about. So I just wanted to mention that record because it was to me, it's one of my favorite records on that album. And a lot of people probably slipped past a lot of people, but that was an important record for me.
Oh man, I'm so glad you called that one out, because I think as these little hidden gem songs go, if you do know and you follow hip hop through the decades and how massive it's got, and you've got artists that when I hear Sedan, I was thinking in this album, you've got these really cartoonish gangsterisms of like what was selling at the time, like we talked about the Chronic and stuff like that. So you have that satire to it. And then you've also got something like this, which is really grounded in real life anxiety and consequences. And I can't stop thinking of Kendrick Lamar and Good Kid, Mad City. And he has songs on there which are very similar, like, just anxiety of having to be in this neighborhood that you grew up in. And yeah, and that's a different world to me. So just to hear these reports from the street that aren't in my world, but they just, grow my knowledge. And I'm so glad you called that one out, man. Absolutely. But people go check out SlaughtaHouse, as I always say anyway. But if we do go on now then, so now we're going to 95, Sittin On Chrome. 94, I do remember hearing your voice on I Chill on the skit for Gangstar, which was always nice to hear that. So I remember you
and Crooklyn came out in 94 too.
And Crooklyn came out in 94. So you were very much on the radar, I would say, at that point. 95, Sittin On Chrome comes out then. Tell us a bit about the context of that album before it come out and your journey maybe towards making that album.
So the important event that happened that led up to the Sittin On Chrome album was I did a remix for Jeep Ass Nigga and I called it Born to Roll. We put it on the B side of SlaughtaHouse, and lo and behold, that particular remix called Born to Roll turns into this huge radio record that nobody was expecting. To the point where they actually had to re-release it as its own single because people were going to the store looking for Born to Roll, and the record shop was like, we don't have that. And they didn't know that it was the B-side to SlaughtaHouse. So they were looking for Masta Ace Born to Roll. They're like, we don't have Born to Roll. We have SlaughtaHouse. Well, I don't want that. I want Born to Roll. So the record was getting, I don't know, whatever the maximum airplay you can get on major radio stations, it was getting that airplay in a lot of markets.
Right.
In particular, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Las Vegas, Houston, Dallas, a lot of the southern and western, Midwest as well. But it was the most radio play that I'd ever gotten in my entire career up to that point. And so the label, we had to go out and shoot a video for it, even though it was a B-side, and we had already done the video for Cheap Ass Nigga, but now we're like basically doing a new video for a song that I already had recorded. We did a brand new video for it. The video winds up being on, there's a show out in the States used to be called Video Jukebox. I don't know if you guys have that out there.
I heard about it, yeah.
People can order it. So it was on that. It got retired on that. Like it was retired on Jukebox. It was on a couple of the late night video shows. It was number one. It got retired on. It became this huge thing. And so with the success of that song, unexpected success of that song, I started doing all these shows. Now the label was like, hey man, we think you got something here with this car culture thing. Like people are really, really connecting with you because of this record. We need to really, on the next record, first of all, we need to get in the studio and start working on the next record. And we need you to give us a car culture we need some more songs like this, like some more songs that speak to that car culture. And I said, okay, that wasn't what my initial instinct would be to do, because that's not what I've never been an type of artist that wants to chase the success of something. If it's successful, great. But I'm not wired to like go, oh, that was successful, let's do more of that. I'm always going to be like, okay, I'm glad y'all like that. How about this? But the label asked me specifically could I give them a car culture record? And I was like, yeah, I think I can pull that off. It's a challenge. Let me go in and try to create a car culture record. So I went in the studio and I started working on songs that would be follow-ups to the success of Born to Roll. And the result was Sittin On Chrome, INC Ride. Those were the two main singles that came out off of that album, Sittin On Chrome and INC Ride, which were both about cruising in cars and that whole idea.
That's fascinating, because you're saying there, there's a conflict set up there, right? Like, they're not selling in East, but they are selling in West and South. And now, like you've said before on the other interview we had, this is your compromise record. And
right.
I just wanted to ask you there about, how are you dealing with that conflict, and what have you learned really? And like to create a project that is still sincere, reflective, it has substance, yet you know it has to fit. Like you said, it's a bit of a challenge, but I don't know, how did you adopt to that? What did you learn from it and stuff like that, if you know what I mean?
I mean, I learned to not listen to record labels and just make the records that feel good and honest to you, to be real. But I did try. I did try to put together a record that felt good to me within the constraints that they gave me.
Right.
You know, and so what I was kind of trying to do was create this new sound where it was kind of like East meets West. And so this whole East meets, I was calling it Brooklyn bass music, which is not even a thing. This is something I came up with. I'm gonna call it Brooklyn bass music. Bass music was hot at that time in the South, so I call it Brooklyn bass. So it's a combination of Brooklyn and down South and West Coast. And so we went in the studio to try to put together beats that could really work either place. So what I started doing was I was coming up with these, I would have these loops, these dope loops, hard loops, but then I would come in and basically bring in a keyboard player or play the keyboard myself and try to add strings and chords on top of this hard beat. And it was definitely influenced by The Chronic, because I saw what The Chronic was doing, and I was like, maybe, so my goal was to try to make this album a little bit more crystal clear, a little bit more loud, and more sonically pleasing to the ear, so we can get some radio play, because that's what the label said they wanted. So I was really trying to chase this idea that, if we can make it really clean and crisp and nice, maybe we can, turn this into something big. And I had watched my label, Delicious Vinyl, they had gone multi-platinum with Tone Loc. They had gone multi-platinum with Young MC. So they did have a pedigree. They knew from what I could see, they knew what to do to, push a record to platinum. So let me give them what they're asking for and see if they can pull it off for me. But there was just a lot of things that went wrong from a distribution standpoint, from an administrative standpoint. A lot of mistakes were made that led to that album not selling what it should have sold. The first mistake was the fact that it was the B-side to SlaughtaHouse, and they didn't anticipate that song being what it turned into. I knew that the song could work. They didn't see it. So now the record is getting crazy radio play, but people can't find it in the store because they don't know that it's on the B-side. So now they're scrambling. It takes them 3 months, 4 months to repress it as a standalone single. By the time it hits the stores, 4 months later, radio play has started to dwindle. You're not getting the same, because that record was getting played for like 3-4 months straight. So by the time it hit the stores, it was the radio play was starting to decrease. It wasn't as intense as it was. Had we had that single in stores when the radio play was happening, I would probably have a platinum single right now. Damn. Definitely a gold single, but probably a platinum single. But those are the sorts of mistakes that lead to, not getting what you expected out of this. What I thought was we had a deal, I'm going to do my part. You guys are going to do your part.
Exactly.
And they I didn't feel like they didn't hold up their end of the bargain.
Because you're compromising your art here to, get to somewhere where they've said that you would get to. So I absolutely understand it. For you then, this album, when you look at it now though, I feel, just on a personal level, I think it's brilliant. It's very different to SlaughtaHouse, but again, it shows your, if not reinvention, but just growth maybe, of like this, again, another concept. How are you landing on this concept for Sittin On Chrome? Because you could have easily just done West Coast bangers and done that, but no, you're tying it in again to like a journey. How did you land on that? Yeah. How did you land on that for Sittin On Chrome?
Well, the goal was to try to mesh East and West, the sounds. And it's very important to note that this was the time period where there was a real East and West conflict going on. There was a lot of East versus West conflict happening. And so I thought if I could pull it off, I thought that what I could do was try to show that we were all one, that we were, even though we were different, that we were all part of the same community. And so I decided to write this story of my cousin who was from LA visiting me in New York, and us, while having differences, we're still related and we're still family, and just kind of show some of the funny differences between me from being from New York, him being from LA, and kind of like make fun of those differences. And so, cousin had the over the top West Coast accent and that whole bit.
Yeah.
But the idea was to bring those two worlds together. And that's what I was trying to do with the music as well, is bring those two worlds together in terms of the sound. Hard New York sounding drums blended together with really pretty sounding chords and keyboards and strings that was more signature West Coast sound. Bring those two worlds together and go platinum, and we just didn't. We didn't go platinum.
So because the sound, like you said, the sound of it, you got the Blues Brothers on there, Ace One yourself, your Unique's on there as well. So it is the same crew kind of thing from SlaughtaHouse, again flexing a different production kind of muscle. For you though, as well as the beats, lyrically, for you as a rhymer who rhymes the way you rhyme, but you're quite flexible. Do you remember thinking, West Coast audience, Southern audience, I might need to actually change my actual lyrical songwriting as well?
I dumbed it down a lot. I dumbed it down a lot because I'm looking at the Chronic, because that's what I just kept looking at. I'm looking at the Chronic. And I'm looking at the simplicity of these rhymes. 1, 2, 3 into the 4. Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre is at the door. And I'm like, damn, he just rhyming. He just flowing. He just, and everybody can sing along because it's easy. So maybe I don't need to do all of this lyrical miracle stuff and just like keep it simple. So I tried to really keep it super simple, dumb it down, put a bunch of things in the rhymes that were easy to follow and sing along with and remember, like some little memorable little parts and stuff like that. Ain't nobody but the INC, like that kind of stuff to make it memorable. So I was literally catering to the commercial hip hop audience, trying to strip it down to its bare bones so that they could get it, understand it. If you listen to the rhymes on SlaughtaHouse compared to Sittin On Chrome, there's no comparison. Like it's clearly different. And so I dumbed everything down with the hopes that, like I said, this was a deal. I had a deal with my label. I'm going to do these things, and you guys are going to do your part. And I did everything that I needed to do on my end, and it still didn't work out.
But if it's any consolation now looking at it, which it probably isn't as much, but it does sound amazing. West Coast slowed it down, and you showed that's another string to your bow. You can absolutely nail that. But if we're looking at songs like INC Ride, Freestyle, there's one. Unbelievable cut. I remember you saying this is for the guys, for the people who know what a freestyle is. It's not off top of the dome. For you at that time, freestyle, pre-written, off the top of the dome. Tell me where you were at with that and that song itself and how that came about.
Well, that was the shift in hip hop hip hop semantics,
Mm.
where people started calling anything off the head, they were calling it freestyle.
Mm.
And so, but there was a confusion because that was like a younger generation of people that were saying that, and they didn't understand that we always use that term freestyle, but it didn't necessarily mean, it could mean off the head, but it didn't necessarily mean that. It just meant a rhyme that wasn't about anything in particular. It was just a rhyme I wrote about how dope I was. One of my rhyme, my braggadocio rhyme. It's not a story. It's not a concept. It's just a braggadocio rhyme. I'm better than you, basically. Mm-hmm. And so, we came up understanding what that meant. All of a sudden, there was a shift in the lingo, and so people started referring to that term freestyle as to mean you're rapping off the top of your head. And if you were saying a written rhyme, that wasn't considered a freestyle. So I wanted to just clear up that confusion. It never worked because people kept using that term, and now to this day,
yeah,
that's what it means. But that wasn't the original meaning of freestyle.
It's just fascinating to see the lineage, of what we use in vocab now to where, there was this kind of break in the culture of, hold on, that doesn't mean, it's just, how we're growing, I suppose. But like,
right.
If you're looking at For the Mind, Cellar Dwellers are on there as well. That's just one of my favorite cuts. So rewindable.
That was my first beat. That was my first beat that I made, or one of my first beats that I made after I got my my MPC 60 lessons from DJ Premier, because Premier is the one who taught me how to use the MPC and the Akai 950. I bought the same equipment that Premier had. I bought the same equipment he had, and I went to his house. He showed me how to use it, and that For the Mind beat was one of the first beats that I made after sitting down with Premier.
Damn, that's crazy. What to come out? That's amazing. And big up Cellar Dwellers as well. That's another group that probably needs a bit more love, and UG Phantasm and stuff like that. And just put that in your car. That is just like, if anyone out there hasn't heard it, get it on. I think it's on streaming. I'm sure it's on streaming. But yeah, Eastbound as well. There's another one that, although it has that unreal beat, and your neck is just getting this workout, like that is a gem. I'll still listen to Eastbound and What's Going On. That's another very West Coast, but sounds still so fresh.
Love that joint.
Yeah, please break down some of the ones that you love, break down them ones that I've talked about. Yeah, open floor, man.
Well, Eastbound, who's listed as the producer on Eastbound?
On Eastbound, I think you've got Ace One as yourself, yeah. Oh, that's on Wikipedia, by the way. That's not on Discogs.
Yeah. On Eastbound? Oh yeah, I did do that one. That's one of those weird loops that I found. It's like a dirty loop. I filtered it. I remember now. What's Going On, I definitely didn't do. But Eastbound, and I got the strings on there. I'm trying to add all of these live elements, the strings, the horns, all those little pieces. That's all from keyboards. Like me trying to combine the hard New York sound drums with the bright, shiny musical sound in West Coast. But I wasn't, see now, if I was smarter, what I would have done was I would have got a real keyboard player to come in and just do, like, because that's what Dre was doing, but I didn't know. Like, I'd never been to one of his sessions. I didn't know. So he's smart. What he was doing was bringing in real musicians. And I'm like, okay, here's the foundation for what I have. Play a bunch of shit on top. And they would go in and just do their magic with their keyboard playing and whatever guitars, whatever they were doing. I didn't play instruments, but I was literally in there like one finger, like, this sounds good. Okay, sample this. I could have really, really knocked those songs out of the park had I had the understanding that for what you're trying to do, you got to bring in real musicians who play these instruments. Then you win. So it's one of those things. It was a learning process. I was learning, man. I was just kind of like winging it, really, man. You know. But you mentioned What's Going On, which I love. who's listed as the producer on that? I definitely didn't do that one.
That's What's Going On is the Blues Brothers. I think you might have a co-production credit on the stuff I've seen though online, flying around online. But Blues Brothers.
Yeah, because I always add my little bits, but it says Blues Brothers. Shout out to my guy Norman Glover, also known as Witch Doctor. He's actually the producer of that beat. Blues Brothers is him and Lord Digger, but he was really the person who made that beat. They were a production team, but it was his beat. He did that beat. And so rest in peace to Norm as well, Norm Glover. But anyway, he had some joints, man. People don't know about Norm, but Norm lived in the same building in the projects in Bed-Stuy. He lived in Roosevelt houses. He literally lived either on the same floor. I think they were on the same floor as Easy Mo B.
Oh wow!
So they were like childhood friends. I think he dated Easy Mo B's sister at one point or something like that. Like they were close like that. So you got two guys, brilliant producers that lived in the same space, same. They grew up together, and you know, he kind of falls through the cracks in terms of hip hop history, but equally as talented. You know, he actually got credits on the Biggie's first album as well. You see Blues Brothers on there,
wicked
on a big, but that was Norm. All those beats were Norm. Like I said, they formed the production team, him and Lord Digger, but the beats that got selected, like the What's Going On beat, were beats that Norm made, that Norm brought to the table. And so, you know, I just wanted to just take a moment to just shout him out, big him up, and say a rest in peace, because he was a good brother, talented brother. And just, you know, definitely a loss to hip hop. But he did his thing on that joint. He did a couple of joints. The ones that anything you see on that Sittin On Chrome album that says Blues Brothers, those were actually Norman Glover's beats.
Interesting. That is Freestyle. We talked about Freestyle. That is that beat as well. I think that's them.
There's another one.
Yeah. But so before we move into Disposable, then, which is quite a distance away in time. You've got, I don't know, on this album, and I've heard that, you know, it's still, you know, is held aloft quite high in the West Coast. Sittin On Chrome, the B-side, People in My Hood, which is a brilliant little concept track, Fat Cat Ride, all these songs. Now when you're touring, and I know you're touring still extensively in your career.
I'll be in London in less than 3 weeks.
I heard that, Jazz Cafe. Yeah, I saw that. So for you, are there still songs off these two albums that we talked about already, SlaughtaHouse, Sittin On Chrome, that you do pull out and throw in a set now and again?
Oh yeah. So I don't really do a lot of records off SlaughtaHouse. Just because of well, a couple of reasons. One reason is I don't have a lot of those TV tracks or instrumentals. I have a few. Right. But the ones that I do have, you know, I only pull those out for fans that really, really want to hear those records. Most fans don't know that album like that. There's always like 2 or 3 people in the audience, but when you're doing a live show, you got to kind of play to the room. And if there's like one guy who wants to hear something off SlaughtaHouse, but there's 50 people that want to hear other stuff, like you kind of gotta. But sometimes if I'm in the right mood, and it's one guy, I might do the record for him just because, you know, I'm just in that right mood. I'll do it, you know. But a lot of those records from that album, from SlaughtaHouse, I don't have instrumentals too. I have a few, but not that many. As far as Sittin On Chrome, there's a couple of, well, I actually off SlaughtaHouse, I do Mad Wunz, but I only pull Mad Wunz out. I only pull it out if the energy in the room is right. If it's a super hype crowd where it's like they're already crazy, then I hit them with that, because I know it's gonna, you know, that song. That's a song where you don't even have to know the song. Yeah. To go crazy when you hear it, because it's just the way it drops. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, but that's like the only song from SlaughtaHouse that I consistently do. Of course, I do Born to Roll, but Born to Roll was really more on the Sittin On Chrome album. But I do more songs off Sittin On Chrome. I do Born to Roll. I do INC Ride.
Nice.
That might be just the only two, really. I do anything else off of that album? Might just be those two, man.
Okay.
Yeah, might just be those two.
Yeah. Still, absolute bangers.
Oh, Sittin On Chrome. Sittin On Chrome. I do Sittin On Chrome.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, what an absolute banger that is. So when you are then, if we're then going into your third album in this run, so you've had these two fascinating insight already into those first two albums I want to talk about, but then you go in 2001, big 6-year hiatus, you know, what happened in that journey? I know you've talked about it before, but for people who maybe haven't heard, where were you artistically, spiritually? What was going on in that hiatus for you, which was a long time in hip hop?
Yeah. So Sittin On Chrome drops in 95. We have all of this success. We have all of this radio success with Born to Roll, and then with INC Ride. And then Sittin On Chrome. So all of these records got radio play, like legit radio play, big stations, rotation. And so you got to remember that this is still smack dab in the middle of the East Coast, West Coast conflict. It actually had gotten even a little bit worse during 96, 97. It actually ramped up even worse. More stuff started happening. The Bad Boy versus Death Row thing got to the point where people start getting killed and stuff like that. So there was this huge, divide between the two coasts. And it was it was exactly like you were on one side or you were on the other. It was literally like Crips Bloods, pick a side. And so because of the success of Sittin On Chrome, Born to Roll, INC Ride on the West Coast, New York didn't fuck with it at all. New York was like, that dude is down with them now. Like they literally, my city essentially turned its back on me as an artist. Like they viewed me as one of them. You're one of them now. Because a lot of people thought I moved there because I was signed to Delicious Vinyl. I spent a lot of time out there. People thought I was living there. So they thought that I chose a side. They thought the side I chose was the West Coast. And so I had a lot of backlash behind the success of those songs in my hometown. And so I left Delicious Vinyl. I made several steps to try to reclaim my, citizenship, if you will, on the East Coast. The first step was to leave Delicious Vinyl, sign to Big Beat Records, which was on the East Coast. I signed to Big Beat Records. I started working on the album. I'm in the studio for 2 years, maybe. 96. I want to say I signed with them 96. Actually, it was like 96. I left. I left 96 right after the album dropped. So I signed a Big Beat. I'm working on the album 96, 97. And then they just did not put the record out. They decided to shelve it. It wasn't, at this point, Bad Boy had kind of taken over the airwaves in New York City. They had all of this R&B laden hip hop that was like the new sound of hip hop, and everything was real shiny and glossy and very stingy, songy and catchy and hooky. And the songs that I was doing for Big Beat were not that at all. Because I had already done the whole compromise thing. I wasn't doing that again. I'm going to do what I want to do. So I was creating this music, and ultimately they decided that what I was playing for them wasn't in line with what they thought was going to be commercially viable music. And so they dropped me. At that point, you're talking about, I got dropped right around, let's see, 98, I guess. 98, something like that. Because I was, because Lachey's album came out in 97. So I was kind of trying to be more behind the scenes, executive produce. Maybe it was a little before. Maybe I got dropped in 97. But I was working on her album. And, I worked on her album. Her album came out. I said, hey, maybe maybe this is the next move for me. Maybe I should just become an executive producer, a producer, give me a job at a label and start working behind the scenes. So that's what I decided to do. And I took, I got a resume made up. I started going on job interviews at labels, trying to see if I get a gig.
Damn.
I started shopping beats. I started going around shopping beats, playing beats for different A&R dudes, and that wasn't really working. Nothing much was happening with that. And then that's 98, 99. 90, what happened in 99 was I'd heard about this new production crew that Jazzy Jeff had put together down in Philly, Touch of Jazz. And they were working on some songs for Will Smith.
Right.
And so they had asked me to come down if I wanted to write some songs. So I traveled down to Philly, and I stayed at Jazzy Jeff's crib and worked on a couple of. I wrote a couple of songs for that project that they were doing, and I worked on some other songs. Just I started dabbling again. You know what I mean? Like I still wasn't sure that I wanted to be an artist anymore, but I started. They kind of talked me into making a couple of songs. I made a couple of those songs or whatever. So that felt cool. That felt all right. And that's 99. And then 2000, opportunity presented itself for me to go out to the UK to do a little tour. It's about 13 shows. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'll travel out to the UK and do these shows. I'll come out to the UK and I do, I think out of the 13, I want to say 11 of them were in the UK and then 2 were in Germany. So I do those shows. To my surprise, UK was coming out to these shows, man. The clubs were packed. People knew the music. They knew the songs. There was a sense of enthusiasm about me being there, and I hadn't felt that. I was all I felt was the backlash of being a West Coast sellout and all of that. That's all I knew. So for me to kind of get that feeling, that warm feeling of like, yo, there's still people out there that actually care about me as an artist. So maybe I will work on another record. Leading up to that, I had started working. I worked at there was a studio in Queens called 7888. And I met these guys. I heard about these guys they were basically trading studio time in exchange for verses for a project that they were working on. So Duck Down had asked me to do a single for the new. Duck Down was trying to do their new thing. So they were like, yo, we want to do a single. I didn't have a studio. So I heard about these guys. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll go down there and get the free studio time in exchange for a verse. So I went down there. I did the song for me and Buckshot called Brooklyn Blocks. And that was the 12-inch that I gave to Duck Down. But in exchange for that, I did a verse for this compilation called Game Over. I did a song, I should say, not a verse, a song, but it's got a compilation called Game Over. And that was our trade. After I did that song, the guys who were in charge of the label at that time was Filthy Rich, DJ Rob, and producer Domingo. And the three of them were like, yo, man, you ever think about doing another record? I was like, nah, I'm done. Like nobody cares. I'm good. I'm done. You should think about it, man. You sound pretty like you still got something in you. Still think you still got another record in you. I was like, all right, nah. So then I go to UK to do this tour. When I come back from that tour, I'm like, you know what? There was some people out there that really was messing with me. So maybe I will. All right, let's do it. Let's do another record. I said, but I don't want no input. I don't want nobody telling me nothing to do or make. I don't want to hear nothing. Just let me do the record. Have it come out, it come out. It's going to be my last go around anyway. So if it's going to fail, let me fail on my own. Let me, if it goes left, I want to say it went left because of something I did. And they were like, all right, that was the agreement. They were going to shut up, and I was going to make the record.
Wow.
So we started making Disposable Arts at the top of 2001, and I was in that studio probably 3 days to 4 days a week. There was constantly producers coming through there with beats, and it was a process. And I remember as I was working on it, you know, Filthy Rich, who's still my partner to this day, I remember him saying something like, because he's just hearing individual songs I'm working on, but he doesn't know the vision that I have in my head for what this is going to be. I've already figured out the story I'm going to tell, the skits, all of it, but none of it's recorded. All I'm doing is recording songs. I remember him saying like, yo, man, it's a lot of kind of slower joints. Like you need some up-tempo joints. I was like, yo, I told you I don't want to hear anything. Don't talk to me. Don't tell me nothing, man. Like I don't want that influence. I don't want anybody seeping anything into my head. So the next beat, I'm like, oh, I got to find something up-tempo. Because then I'll start thinking that way. And I don't want that. Just let me do the record. Like, all right. So I start putting together the songs. And then when the songs are all done for the most part, probably like 80% of the songs are done, then I start putting the skits together. And it was at that point that he started to see the vision and see it all come together. And when it was all said and done, we found distribution through J. Core, who I mentioned earlier, where Abby was working. And it turned into the single most important album of my career. Single most important.
That is incredible. And I remember, just if you're ever looking for on-the-ground reports of the album landing, 2001-ish at university, all the hip-hop heads, all backpackers pretty much, and M was huge, DMX was huge, Jay-Z was huge, all this stuff.
Right.
But Disposable Arts was like that little, but if you're a head, you're going to love this. Yeah. And it was this thing of, hold on, so it's Masta Ace. I know I hadn't got into SlaughtaHouse at this point. Again, I'm one of them people that have heard Disposable Arts and I went back. But I knew of you, of course, the Symphony, Juice Crew, all that. So I was like, okay, Masta Ace is back. Okay, cool. And they're like, no. It's a concept though. Like, listen to Alphabet Soup. Listen to, at that time, Hellbound with Eminem was on the Game Over compilation. And as Eminem stands, they were all throwing this. You check the compilation out. Masta Ace is on there. Holy shit, okay, so he is coming back. And this album, I remember that time just thinking, holy shit, this guy, he's not just, you could have come back and just done what you're great at anyway, which is machismo, bit of social conscious stuff, whatever. Instead, you're doing all that. You're looking at rap's evolution. What we were talking about, that was on our minds as hip-hop heads. Like, hip-hop isn't the same. And we grew up in 92, 93, like, listen to hip-hop. Not in the 80s. The 80s, lads, they felt even more. But, like, exploitation, appropriation of this culture, which we didn't have the language for that, Ace. At that time, I was so young, I didn't have the vocabulary to explain myself and what appropriation was or exploitation was. But to hear an energized, and you sounded completely re-energized person just feeding me this kind of storyline with all these amazing, like, big up Paul Barman, man. Them skits were just incredible. So I just wanted to tell you from that point of view, that album really vocalized a lot of stuff we were feeling. Raucous was having a bit of a, I don't know, there was a big camp of Raucous fans, you know, at that time. And 2001, it was huge at that time, the backpackers over here. So yeah, no, I'm glad that the UK helped you just rediscover some of that form maybe. But break down that title for me then, because Disposable Arts, it's a loaded title. I remember hearing the title thinking, that's quite loaded. That's like, you know, that hip hop's disposable. For you, did you ever feel that hip hop was becoming disposable? How did you land on that as a title for your album?
Well, it was becoming disposable. I landed on that title because that was the era, and I remember it very clearly. I remember hearing a couple of artists that were at the time like New York artists who were like big names. I'm trying to remember. I don't think DMX was one of them, but it was somebody from that Def Jam circle. I remember hearing an interview of an artist. I can't think of who it was. I don't think it was DMX. But I remember them saying Yeah, we went in the studio. We made 40 songs. We made 40 songs in like a month.
Wow.
And then we just picked the best 10 for the album. I'm like, what? Like, okay. Because I was used to just going in and every song was intentional. This is for the album. I'm not doing any throwaways. There's no throwaways. But the other reason that I landed on that title is because I had just gone through witnessing with my situation with Big Beats, witnessing just how disposable my art was to them. It was, something I worked on for 2 years, just about. They were very comfortable just shelving it, just like, oh, we're not putting this out. Like, this is not something we're going to put out. And so it showed me just how little they cared about the art of it. It was just another commodity for them. And so that's how I felt. And so, everything down to the cover, it all connected. The cover, was, I won't say the cover was a mistake, but the cover was not planned. The cover was not planned. The way it came out, we had a photo shoot, took a bunch of pictures, me standing, sitting, different things. And I could tell during the photo shoot that this was not going well. Like I didn't care if the pictures were going to look good or not. What I cared about was, what a picture is going to be an album cover. What are going to mean anything? And so on my way into the photo shoot, right next door to the studio, there was a used or it was like not a used car lot, but it was like a auto repair shop right next door. And when I walked in, I looked down and there was a car seat sitting in a pile of junk. I saw the car seat, but I didn't think anything of it. I thought something of it, but I didn't do anything at that moment. I went inside, we started taking these pictures, and he's like, pose like this, pose like that. And I'm doing all these different poses, but I'm like, is this all we doing? Like, we're just taking stand up, like with a backdrop. That's all we're doing. And I was like, yo, I'll be right back. And I ran out of the studio. I went next door. I didn't ask permission. I just picked up the car seat off the ground, off the pile of junk, brought it inside, and I sat it in front of the camera. He's like, what's this? I was like, I want to take a couple pictures of that. He's like, all right, sure. So I sat down on the car seat, and this is like I said, with a plain backdrop. We took a bunch of pictures with me sitting on the car seat. The car seat stood out to me because I realized that I was leaving behind that whole car culture, SlaughtaHouse movement. So when I saw the seat sitting there, I was like, ooh, that could be something, because I'm moving on. Like, I'm not chasing the car culture thing anymore. I'm leaving it behind. So once things weren't going well, I had it in the back of my mind, I'm gonna go get that car seat. We're gonna have a prop. I brought that in. We used that as a prop. Lo and behold, that ends up being the picture that we use, which I'm glad that, I'm sure that photographer pats himself on the back because how brilliant he was to come up with this, but he had nothing to do with that picture at all. I mean, he took the picture, but
yeah,
we literally put that together ourselves, because even the back, so just so you know, the background of the cover, that was a separate picture. That was a separate picture. So I'm superimposed. Me on the car seat is superimposed on top of that streetscape. The photographer went out. He was supposed to go out and he got like 10 grand or something like that for this photo shoot, something crazy. And he was supposed to go out and shoot a bunch of different backgrounds, and then we were supposed to try to superimpose my picture to a different background. So he was supposed to shoot the Brooklyn Bridge and some key little places in Brooklyn. He comes back. He doesn't go to Brooklyn Bridge. He shoots Queensbridge instead. Wrong bridge.
Oh shit.
We can't use those. I'm not from Queensbridge. We can't use those. So the photographer, I forget his name now. I'm sure I can look on the back of the record and see it. But he took the position that I've already been paid. I've taken the pictures that I said I was going to take. It's up to you guys to figure out the rest of it, which was really pissed me off. The only thing that he did do was he's like, I have a bunch of other backgrounds that I've shot in the past for other projects. If you guys want to go through those, feel free to go through those. So he gave us all of the background shots, and it was up to us to sit there and superimpose my picture in the car seat with all of these backdrops. And then once it landed on that backdrop with the street lamp, and it was nighttime and that glare, I was like, that's the cover. Like immediately when I saw it, I said, that's the cover. That's the cover.
That's amazing.
But it was a process. It wasn't, like I said, it was not planned. It's not like we wrote this out. This is what we're going to do. No, it worked out that way.
Sometimes they do, though. Sometimes these things do work out that way. But what does sound very planned out is the concept of the album, as well as touching on, because I know, even though you are playing characters, I want to talk to you about Barman in a minute, and you've got like that policeman at the front and everything else, and you have like concept tracks within the big concept. But I remember hearing Too Long being like, you know, within this story. But then I remember hearing you say Pacing Like a Caged Lion with Rage Crying, and that hit different, knowing how long you've been away kind of thing. Yeah. So your heart was kind of in these bars, and it was a really interesting way of portraying, because, you know, you could come out and just bang, this is what happened, calling people out and whatever, but you masterfully kind of did it in this concept. It was amazing. But on MC Paul Barman, you got Commercial on here, the Institute of Disposable Arts, which is still hilarious, and not just comedy, like really cutting close to the bone comedy. Like The Last Rites, I could see myself doing that, you know, as this person who's not in the world of hip hop apart from the community, and having that, what's he say now, where about we've got to, you know, preserve the culture and, you know, 80s, 90s. And I was like, holy shit, is that me? Oh my God, I hope I'm not that guy. But you also know that there is an element, and people talk about it now about culture vultures and how prevalent it's been in the last few years in the hip hop kind of thing. But for you, those skits, how do they come about? How did that even ethos of thinking about appropriation, exploitation, and then how did Barman fit into all of that? How did that all come about?
I mean, sometimes when you're doing things, you have these ideas, and but you never know how they're going to be viewed, or how they're going to. I really wasn't thinking about how anybody else was going to take it or receive it. It was, in my mind, it was my final album that I wanted people to know where my heart was at, where my mind was at, so that when it was all said and done, they would know how I felt about the journey, how I felt about the culture. So I literally wasn't trying to teach anybody anything. It was me letting you know, these are my words. This is how I feel about this entire picture of our culture, of our industry. And I'm sharing it with you. I just figured out how I wanted to say those things through these different characters on the album, Paul Barman being one of them. And, you know, I met Paul in the year 2000. I met Paul in 2000. He was managed by this guy Matt Goyas, who was connected to, at the time he was like helping Lacoste to basically become more relevant in the street again. And so basically Lacoste was paying artists to wear their stuff down to this clothing convention called Magic. It's a twice a year clothing convention in Las Vegas. So Lacoste paid for a bunch of us from New York as tastemakers to basically go down to the convention. They covered our hotel, our meals, and they gave us gear to basically just walk around the convention wearing their stuff, you know, like walking billboards. And to make, it was like, the idea was to make Lacoste cool again. It's so interesting that I wear Lacoste all the time now. I never even thought about the connection. Like my wife buys me Lacoste constantly. I should be getting this stuff for free. But anyway, that's how I met Paul. He was one of the artists that Lacoste brought down for, and I think they did like a party. They did like a Lacoste party where we performed. I feel like I rapped. I did something at the party, like some little something. But I met Paul during that trip, and he was mad cool. And he invited me after that trip. he was performing at a place in New York, Manhattan, called Joe's Pub. Pretty famous at the time. He was performing. They invited me out. I came out to his show at Joe's Pub, and we just got cool. And so when I started working on, he was a very quirky, different kind of guy. He stood out to me as somebody who wasn't the norm, but he was still hip hop. And so I thought he would be the perfect kind of juxtaposition roommate for somebody with my personality. So I asked him to be on the skit. He was sure, I'll do it. And I remember him coming in, and he read the script or whatever. There was a couple of things he kind of questioned at first, like he didn't like the part about the grades and getting good grades. Something about the teacher giving easy A. And when he said easy A, he's like I don't really believe in, I don't think the grading system. He was trying to give me some little philosophical point of view about school, and I was just looking at him like, come on, Paul, knock it off. He's like, all right. And then but he made some of it was off the dome for him, especially when the roommates meet. Like it was a lot of ad-libbing. I had the written lines, but he did like, holy cow! He's like running up and down the room, like he literally was running back and forth in the booth. So all of that stuff was like kind of like him. He just did it on his own. And so, but he was like the perfect addition to those skits, because and it was a harken back to me, my college days, because the roommates that I had when I was in college were very opposite of me as well. I had a roommate that was like completely just junky, dirty. I'm super neat. He's super junky. We had several run-ins about the room, and he kept all his junk. Like if you walked in the room, it was like one side was super neat, and it was like almost like a line in the room, and then all the junk was on the other side of the room. And so I just wanted to reach back to that time period, because I remember having that roommate and dealing with that. So Paul was like the perfect vehicle to kind of get that across. But man, he delivered, man. He delivered. He was the perfect character for it. Like I could have got somebody more kind of right down the middle, like typical kind of character, but he was just the perfect personality for that. And we still cool to this day. We text each other all the time.
That's wicked. That's really good, man.
Got a wife and kids now, which is crazy.
That is crazy, isn't it? Time's a trip, man. Time is an absolute trip. And so on that though, like you've got the skits, you've got like I've talked about before, the Substances album. You've also got, and I know it was a misunderstanding, but it is one of the most perfect diss records I've ever heard on Acknowledge. And I'm not sure how you want to talk about it or not, but because High and Mighty, obviously we've heard afterwards it was a miscommunication, stuff like that, but it really did make me think, Jesus Christ, no one should ever test Masta Ace, because he would just chop off heads. But like, you've got Acknowledge, you've got Take a Walk, you've got Something's Wrong, which I gather Eminem was supposed to be on that as well, Block Episode, Alphabet Soup, all these things. For you, which are the songs that, say you meet a fan for the first time, or what are the songs that people really want to talk about or request or want to, hear about from you?
Take a Walk is a fan favorite, without a doubt. It's a fan favorite. If I was gonna introduce somebody to Disposable Arts for the first time, and you said, what 3 songs would you want them to listen to? That would be one of the songs I would tell them to listen to. I probably would tell them to listen to Alphabet Soup, just because of the type of wordplay that we're doing on that song. And then maybe Unfriendly Game, with the football analogies. But that album, out of all the albums, that's the one album that I would put it on and listen to it. Like if I was going to listen to one of my records from top to bottom, that would be the record, because it'll take me back to that time period. Like immediately, I remember everything about when I was making those songs, and I remember what the studio looked like, and some of the intricate details of those records getting made. Like for example, on Don't Understand, Greg Nice, I paid Greg Nice to come in and do the chorus, and he comes in. I mean, he knocked it out in like 2 takes. He got his money, he leaves, and then the engineer makes a mistake and erases over his shout outs at the end.
Oh my.
And there's no getting him back. So if you listen to that song at the end, you'll hear him talking at the very end. He comes in halfway through a sentence. He says, "Mash, by the mash to the ace, y'all." There was a whole speech that led up to that mash that got erased and couldn't be. This was before Pro Tools, right? So this was like actual tape. This was we were using ADATs at the time, so it got erased and it couldn't be. Luckily, he didn't erase the hook. We had the hook at least. But
oh man.
But those are kind of the little cool little memories about that, time period that I think about it. I remember going to the first time I met Eminem. I think I mentioned already, but I met him at Nassau Coliseum. The reason that I went there to meet him is because I wanted to play him the Something's Wrong song to see if he would, get on that song for me. And so we met backstage, just me and him, talked for a little while. I played him the Hellbound song because he hadn't heard it.
Oh.
He hadn't heard it.
Right.
Yeah, he hadn't heard it. And as soon as he heard his verse, he's like, "Oh, I remember this rhyme. And he's listening to it. But he hadn't heard me on it or anything. He didn't hear the hook. He heard nothing. He didn't even hear that beat.
Wow.
Because the beat that he originally did that rhyme to was a totally different beat. So it was his first time hearing it. He's like, "Oh, this came out good. It came out good." He liked it. And then I played him Something's Wrong. He said, "It's dope. It's dope. All right." I gave him a copy. And he said, I'll get back to you. And then maybe a week after, he hit me and he basically said, his manager said that it's not a good time. The manager said the excuse was that he was on too many records. Like I think he was on Jay-Z's album.
Renegade.
What was Renegade? Yeah, there was a few other records, bigger artist names that he was on, and they just didn't feel it was a good time for him to be on that. So whatever, I'm sure there was more to the conversation, but it didn't happen for whatever reason. But those are just some of the, memories that I think about. I remember getting the beat for "Take a Walk" from Gerard C. Baker. He produced that. I remember going to his house. He lived in Flatbush, Flatbush area. I remember going to his crib, and I was in his bedroom, like it looked like his bedroom when we were in high school, like it looked like it was still decorated like a high school bedroom.
Yeah. And
we went through a few beats, and I was like, "Give me this, this, and this." Like 3 joints, and "Take a Walk" was one of them. I said, "All right." So he gave me copies of 3 beats. I left his crib. I got in the car. I'm playing it in the car. I get to the corner. I call. I said, "Yo, I want this one. This the one. It's no question. This is the one I want." So just like little memories, like those are some of the things, details that I remember about making that album.
Amazing. Amazing. Because you talk about M there. I remember there's M reference on "Don't Understand," where it's like, "How to make black music, how to make white music," that thing. I was like, "Oh, wow." That
was a nod. That was like a tip of a hat,
Yeah, I loved that. I absolutely loved that back then. Them little flourishes, we lived for those. But you said like Alphabet Soup. I've heard again that was a shelved cut, and I know you said in Big Beat that whole album was shelved. Any of that album get reworked, or was Alphabet Soup maybe on that thing you'd worked on, or was it just completely just left to the ether and you just moved on?
Alphabet Soup was definitely one of the ones that got reworked. Different beat, completely different beat. The original beat was produced by Socrates.
Right.
That would have been on that shelved album. There's something else on that album that got reworked. A lot of the other songs that got reworked, they came out on Long Hot Summer, not on Disposable. It might have been just that one. It could be something else. I would need the I would need the track list in front of me to even remember. I don't have the track list.
All right, no worries. That's absolutely. It's been a long time. Yeah. I said it's been a long time.
Yeah,
that's interesting because when I hear you talked about late model sedan on SlaughtaHouse, right, and then we talk about what was the other one that we talked about on Sittin On Chrome, which was like, hold on, I've got it here. People in my hood. That as well linked a little bit to that, and then I heard Block Episode. And it felt like this natural progression of you telling me the story of people in your surroundings, in your environment, and like the shifting perspectives. Like Block Episode for me is just incredible. For you, do you remember that being like just what was the story behind that cut?
So that beat, shout out to my guy D Prosper, because he's the one who brought that beat to the table. It was produced by this guy named Louis Sabor, and but D Prosper is the guy I knew from Rhode Island when I went to college in Rhode Island. He was really interested in getting involved in the music industry, and he started taking trips to New York to try to get to know people, and he did it. He got to know people. He actually ended up knowing more people than me. Because he was just that determined. I took him to a couple of industry parties, and I remember him being at the parties. He was literally introducing himself to everybody at the party and asking them, "And what do you do?" Okay, I'm D Prosper, blah 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 blah. And so years later, after all of that, he's like doing studio sessions with Talib Kweli and Mos Def, and he's like in that circle. And I'm like, damn, how do you know these guys? He's like, yo, I got to know everybody. He literally ended up knowing everybody. So
wow.
When I told him I was working on this record, he came to the studio with this music, and like that, I immediately picked that beat because I just loved it. I loved the way it felt. And I had met Punch in Words maybe in 2000, like a little bit before. I met them and liked them. Didn't really know them, but I heard a couple of songs. They had an EP that was coming out, and I liked the songs that I heard. I liked they were very different, but I liked the fact that they were different. One was kind of more thuggy, and one a little more street, and one was a little bit more intellectual. I like that. So I thought they would fit perfectly on this song if one of them could be the shooter, and the other one could be, the guy who got shot. And initially, Words was supposed to be the intended target of Punch on the song.
Right.
But Words didn't like the idea of being the intended target for his group mate. He's like, yo, I'd rather it be like a stray bullet type of thing. I was like, okay, no problem, do it. And they wrote their parts and love that song.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there's a fair few on here that have, I suppose, become quite a few fan favourites from just my perspective, from people that I know. But I can't wrap up this album without talking about Hold You, which is, again, such an incredible concept track. But with Jean Grey, I know you got Raw Digger on this album, and you have you have a lot more features on this album. Generally, I feel like it isn't
three female features, which I don't think has ever been done on a male rap album.
There you go. Right, and it stood out. It really did. But Jean Grey, absolute legend. What did she bring? Like when you were working with Jean, and when that track came about, how did you even work that concept out? How did you pan that out with her?
She's a pretty smart writer, so I knew she would get it. I just told her, like, yo, I'm rapping about this girl, but it's not actually a girl. It's actually hip hop, and I want you to just basically embody that. I want you to be that girl that's hip hop and rap from the perspective of being hip hop, but being this girl. And she got it, understood it, and ran with it. And the funny thing is, the beat produced by Ayatollah, I had done. Ayatollah owed me a beat. I did a verse for him for something, song or something. He owed me a beat, so he gave me a CD, had about 8 or 10 beats on it. And he's like, pick one of these. And I'll be honest with you, when I went through them all, I was like, I don't think I like any of these. And so
right,
I hit him back, and he wasn't really getting back to me. And I was like, let me listen to them again.
Mm.
And then I listened to that one again, and I was like, I could probably work with this one. But it wasn't like that immediate. Like when I heard Take a Walk, it wasn't immediate, like this is the joint. Like it was like, I don't know.
Mm.
But once I wrote to it and laid my verse down, then it started really to grow on me. And now it's like one of my favorite joints to perform. Like I love it now, but at the time, because he had done, at that point, he had done Miss Fat Booty, and he had done a couple of pretty dope joints, and I was like, I want one of those. Like, well, it was I was looking for him to, recreate something that you can't do that. You got to make each thing be its own thing. You can't be looking for. Can't say, yo, give me another Miss Fat Booty.
For sure,
that's already been done. It's already been done.
Yeah,
so I think I was looking for more, and I think I so loved the Miss Fat Booty beat that when I heard Hold You, I was like, this is not as good as that.
Right.
But at the same time, I didn't realize how good it was until I really started to write to it and lay my verse down. Then I was like, oh, this joint is kind of dope. But out of all the songs on the album, that's the one song that I was shaky on at first.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
That's one of the first ones I fell in love with. It's so odd, isn't it? It's how art works. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's all me. I was just, like I said, I was just comparing it to Miss Fat Booty, and like, it's cool, but it ain't that. And I had to really get out of my head on that. I had to just, now I realize I was bugging out. I'm like, but we have these moments sometimes. You hear something and you're like,
For sure.
But you hear it later and you're like, man, I was wrong on that one.
For sure. Man, that's amazing. Thank you for that just insight. I did not know that. But yeah, people do go check out all these albums, I would say. But on Disposable Arts, you've got Dear Diary, Goodbye Lisa, Every Other Day, and you've got stuff where you're venting like Enough and kind of type People I Hate, kind of the type I hate. But an Unfriendly Game, this concept of sport in there as well. But I just wanted to say, when you hear it now and I hear like, what was the No Regrets, it does feel like a goodbye record. And I'm so glad it didn't become that.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and it felt that energy was there, man. So I just want to say thank you for not saying goodbye and then coming in the legacy of this 3-album run. Well, you tell me, but when I hear like Story of Me, like you did recently, well, relatively recently, I just want to say thank you for making a song like that, because after all these years, like decades later, I'm like, Jesus, Masta Ace is still hitting me. Everyone go listen to Story of Me, because that is just unbelievable, that song. But thank you for that song. But also on the legacy of these 3 albums, what do you think it is for you personally, or for just what you've heard from fans? How would you wrap this kind of album run up?
So SlaughtaHouse was my first sort of attempt, if you will, at doing a concept album. I knew I had it in me, but I didn't quite know what I was doing yet. So I did SlaughtaHouse, and then I raised the bar a little bit more on Sittin On Chrome. So it was a little bit. So then I had more characters. SlaughtaHouse didn't really have characters. Sittin On Chrome had characters. I had my cousin and the girlfriend and this and that. But I still hadn't quite figured it out. It wasn't until 6 years later when I did Disposable that I figured out the formula. But it took SlaughtaHouse to Sittin On Chrome to get to Disposable for me to figure out how to really pull it off. And from that point forward, I was like, I got it now. Now I know exactly what I'm doing. And all these albums are going to be like this now. Amazing.
We're all here like just reaping the rewards, man. So thank you so much for the music, Ace. But yeah, thank you for your time, for sitting here, digging into these records with us. I have 100 more questions, but I'm not going to go into them because we've already taken about a few hours of your time. And it would be remiss of me if I have a Juice Crew member on the show when we don't talk about Granddaddy IU. Just wanted to say RIP and
all right, rest in peace, man.
Yeah. 100%. And just all of you, man. I'm glad that we can keep this history. The only way to keep history alive sometimes is to keep talking about it and keep, like, you know, reminding people about this stuff. So thank you, man. True legends. So before you leave, I have to ask you what I ask everyone before they go. Masta Ace, what is the last great piece of music that you heard? It could be new, could be old, it could be your own, could be someone else's, but just the last great piece of music where you were like, damn, that is great.
There's a song by Common, and this female whose name escapes me right now. The song is called "Don't Forget Who You Are."
Right.
And Common does the verses, the girl does the singing, and when I tell you, the moment that I heard that song, I heard it on somebody's TikTok, so it was only like a snippet, right?
Right.
I heard a snippet and I was like, it'll tell you at the top what the name of the song is. So I immediately went, found the song, and when I tell you, I played the song 10 times in a row, immediately.
Damn.
And then I called my wife. I said, I need you to hear this song. And I sat her down and her friend down, and I played the song for them. And yeah. It's an emotional song for me. So my daughter just got accepted to a college, and she's going to be going away in August to college for being on her own for the first time. And I told her that's the song that I'm going to play for her before we leave her on that campus. And so there's not many songs that are made in this current day and time that get that emotional reaction. It's a beautiful song, and I'm glad you asked me that question because I hadn't thought about it. But I play that song constantly, and every time I play it 3 times in a row because I need to hear it that many times in a row.
Bro,
yeah,
I'm so happy that you can share this with us, but also that you have that music is affecting an artist like you and your family. And it just says a lot about this music you guys have given us, man, from Common to yourself to everyone else. I'm sure there are people out there who have felt that about your music as well, bro. So yeah, much love to your family. I hope your daughter goes and smashes it like her dad has gone and done. I'm sure she will. And yeah, man, just keep on smashing it, bro. Keep on pushing because it's inspirational. It really is. So thank you for just opening up for us. And yeah, I really appreciate it, man. I do.
New album with Marco Polo coming this year.
Boom. Let's go.
Yeah.
And you're touring.
Yeah. We'll be in Europe from February 17th all the way until March 12th, 13th.
Mm-hmm.
So check out my page. You can find the tour dates.
Wicked. That's absolutely brilliant. And even what I love about that, you actually have request a date or request a location on your website. And I was like, that's amazing. I can actually request you to come all the way to where I am in Northern England, which would be great. So yeah, bro, thank you.
There's a promoter there, sure.
Thank you so much, Ace. And just keep smashing it, bro. And yeah, doors are always open. If you ever want to come on, we can help support anything you create. Just hit us up, man. Absolutely. Definitely.
Absolutely, brother.
Thank you very much. Thank you, bro. Peace and much love.
Later.
Peace.